second technique that I have been figuring out as I've been working on Terragenesis is make them earn it. So in this, we're drawing inspiration from Tom Sawyer. And anybody who doesn't know this story, a famous scene in Tom Sawyer, he's been punished because he's been skipping school, and so he's been punished with the task of whitewashing a fence. And he doesn't want to do it. And as he's working, very lonely, another boy comes along and is like, ha, you have to work while I get to go out and play. And Tom says, well, I mean, you couldn't handle this job. And then he's like, what do you mean? And he starts to present the idea of whitewashing a fence as something that really only the best kids are trusted with. I mean, come on. And by the end of the scene, Tom has a line of kids that are waiting their turn to whitewash this fence and paying for the privilege just because of how he has framed the job. He hasn't lied to them in any way. He hasn't changed the nature of the job. He hasn't even gamified it. He's just taught them to believe that this is something that you gotta earn. So in Terragenesis, we have a system called the biosphere. We rolled it out last February. It's incredibly complex. It's probably more complex than the rest of the game combined. It is a fully featured ecosystem simulator where you as the player build a global ecosystem species by species, starting with microbes and then plants and then herbivores and then carnivores on both aquatic and terrestrial tracks. Each species is not picked from a list of species. You don't just bring wolves to Mars. You engineer them gene by gene. So you say, I want to create a terrestrial mammal. And then I'm going to take the genes for cold-adapted, nocturnal, and social behavior. You have now created a wolf on Mars. But you could just as easily say, I want to create a terrestrial reptile. I'm going to add large, and flying, and have dragons on Mars. Because why wouldn't I? It's an incredibly complicated system, but it is by far the most beloved system in the game among the fans that play it. But you know what we did when we rolled it out? We said, oh, the biosphere? That's really just for experts. And this is a way of gating out people who would be intimidated by the complexity. Play a few games first, learn how Terragenesis works, and then you can tackle the biosphere. But it's also a way of teaching people the simplified version is for the casuals. If you really know how to play this game, you're going to play it the realistic way. You're going to do the real thing. That's how the true hardcore gamers act. And it works. People work toward the biosphere. They share tips on how to create the best species. And they start engaging with these ideas of biodiversity. And why does it matter that the bees are disappearing? Well, it's because I had bees on my planet, and when they disappeared, everything went to hell. So, we built this system where all of the genes that you're dealing with are realistic. The phylums that you're dealing with are realistic. Microbes, you're not just creating a microbe, you can create diatoms, or actinobacteria, or cyanobacteria, and they have realistic repercussions, realistic attributes. So the third method that we use in Terragenesis is also the easiest to do in any game, and oftentimes the most fun, because it doesn't require a lot of integration, and that's unnecessary details. So, for example, we have this again. I wasn't able to get this animating, it's just a still image, but if you were to see it animating, you would notice that everything is orbiting in one direction except for Venus, which is orbiting in the other direction. And we actually get bug reports every so often from people who are like, guys, it's not a big deal, but Venus is going the wrong way. Except that Venus actually does go the wrong way. Venus has what's called a retrograde rotation, where it orbits the opposite way to all the other planets. We're still trying to figure out why. But that's true. It impacts the gameplay not at all. It has zero impact in any way, but it's accurate. So let's do it. All of the planets in Terragenesis, all of the moons, like I said, use realistic topography. The only time we fictionalize it is if we haven't mapped the other side of that moon, which has happened for certain moons. So I had to hire an artist to be like, this is what one side of the moon looks like. What do you think the other side looks like? So that kind of thing, just peppering in these little details. This is another one. When NASA announced the TRAPPIST-1 system, 7 Earth-like planets orbiting a single star. Every science fiction writer's dream. When they announced it, they were smart enough to recognize that you need to have an illustration of this for people to really get what you're talking about, and so they released the top image. And it was great, and it made headlines, and it was huge. We rolled out TRAPPIST-1 as playable planets in Terra Genesis. Now, we had no idea what these planets look like. All right, we have detected these planets in the sense that the light from the star flickered a little bit. We have no idea what the surface of these planets looks like. But I was able to recreate the image that NASA released. Because again, it just builds this understanding of realism into the game. It's not, mandatory. I could have just as easily done a completely fictionalized world. In fact, it probably would have been easier because I wouldn't have had to recreate that shit. And it would have been able to play into the gameplay a little bit. I would have been able to craft the levels according to the way the game works, instead of being constrained by what an artist did without any idea of a game being built around it. But the fact that it had this realism built into it, people still talk about it. We released these a year ago, and people are still like, whoa, this looks just like that thing. We've actually had people, I think 3 or 4 times, people have messaged us, sort of coyly, kind of awkward, and be like, guys, listen, I don't want to start anything, but I think NASA stole your images. Which is just about the most flattering thing ever. So there are also examples of these throughout other games. This is Civ 4, which is fantastic. And there's a lot going on, and you'll notice every once in a while as you play, you get a great general character. And they build it as great generals, and it comes up and you get a pop-up that says, a great general has appeared. But when it's on the map, it's not just a great general, it's Zhukov. That is a specific general that existed in the world. And again, that has no gameplay implications. This unit does not work the way Zhukov worked in battle. He has no tactics or anything like that. He does not even just show up for the Russians. Anybody can get him. But the fact that Zhukov's name is right there helps players to build this understanding of the world. And then again, as they start to encounter these names, they will start to get more curious, build a better understanding. So, we started with quotes. It seems only fitting to end with quotes. Leonardo da Vinci once said, learning never exhausts the mind, and that's a lie. That is a dirty lie. But what it ought to say is that learning should never exhaust the mind. It is unnecessary to exhaust minds while teaching people. You can create really deep, substantive learning experiences just by peppering it in to a game that players would never think of as educational. But by peppering in these details, you can convey a lot of information, and what's more important than that, you can make them love learning. You can make the players really get into it. We've gotten messages from people who said, I use your game in my science class, or I chose my major based on this game I downloaded on my phone. It's amazing the impact that you can have. So, that's Terra Genesis, and that's what I've got to say. If you have any questions, I'll be around here for a little while. You can take a picture of my contact info, shoot me an email. Terra Genesis is available on iOS and Android right now, so you can check it out and see for yourself how well you think we did conveying real science. Thanks for listening. I think I probably need to start clearing out of here to make room for the next person. But
we're just going to start setting up.
Okay.
People can
Yeah.
talk
If
to
anybody
you
has
for a moment,
questions,
like
come on
5
up.
minutes of that, and I'll let you know.